So next we have Dr. Sachiko Muto, who is both from the research side in terms of doing research on this area with RISE in Sweden, but also the Chair of OpenForum Europe. So she's here to share her thoughts about what's happening in Europe. Please, Sachiko, I'll get you.
Asked to do 10 minutes, but maybe you're expecting me to go over. So I was the last person to share my slides. Sorry, Gab, I know. Last night, but it was still too early, I think, because after hearing Claire, your introductory talk, I could already cut, 60% of my presentation, and then, Barry, you covered some other things as well, and and also interesting things. And by the time I'm standing here now, after Omar, Gab also speaking, I think I could skip to just the last two slides, but since I've sent them in, I'm gonna stay disciplined and go through it anyway. And I think the spin on it is really what Claire has asked me to do, is to kind of take the policy sort of angle on it, because as we know, some of the the rate of adoption in the marketplace is not always matched by the rate of sort of understanding by policymakers of the importance of things. And institutions change slowly, and there's a process to that. And so, as Claire said, I'm a senior researcher at RISE, which stands for Research Institutes of Sweden. I'm also the chair of OpenForum Europe. We are a not-for-profit organization based in Brussels since 2005. I think we were founded, actually. We've been promoting open technologies and open source since then. And I wanted to take a little moment there to also reflect on how the conversation has moved on since I joined the organization in 2007. Right. I'm actually not very, the first conference I attended as OFE, with OFE, I had the pleasure of meeting Vint Cerf. I don't know if you know Vint Cerf. And he said something like, all power corrupts, but PowerPoint corrupts. Absolutely. So, in any case, I felt the peer pressure because, like at 3 a.m. last night, Gab uploaded his slides, and at 9 a.m. this morning, I was the only person who had not uploaded mine, so I did find some slides. But just to say, when I arrived in Brussels in 2007, there was a certain momentum around open source at the time. It was kind of a first wave of interest in open source by policymakers, but it was really very simple conversation we're having to fix that. It was really like, should we, pay a Microsoft license for the Office, Office suite, or should we try Google Docs? And then this was really fueled, in the wake of the financial crisis. There were some governments that were considering just from the cost-cutting perspective mainly. And this we've already seen. Apparently, it's not 92%; it's 96%, or I don't have the latest figures, but that's that's where we are now. And I think let's skip this. This is an old slide that I have, and I remember I presented this to the European Parliament in 2018, I think. I was invited to speak at an event on open source in the European Parliament, and I wanted to kind of show policymakers that we had really moved on. Something had happened in the marketplace, and I wanted to show these are the at the time, and I'm sure Gab sitting here is looking at it. He's you're studying it, and you're touching your beard. So this was European companies that were, I think, that were members of the Linux Foundation at the time, and I think at the silver level at least, or something like that. And so I just wanted to kind of impress policymakers in Brussels that it's not some kind of hobby niche activity. This is something that's being taken very seriously by all these household names. And I think since then there's something has really happened. There is a momentum growing, and I think it sort of started around 2020 when the European Commission published its first open source strategy. I think some of you may have seen that, where it was really for the first time that the Commission put out a document that talked about its internal strategy, but it was meant also for external consumption, and basically tying open source to a lot of things that the European Union wanted to achieve across a number of areas, and also to kind of meet this. I thought there was going to be another slide coming up, but so that just tying it to many sort of higher level objectives that the European Union had set out to kind of face this digital decade that they were talking about at the time. And so it's nice to come to an event and already have seen my affiliation, the logo on the slides of previous speakers, and I think I saw this one in your presentation, Barry. I was part of a European Union Commission study to establish the economic and social impact of open source on the European economy. Together with Fraunhofer, OpenForum Europe delivered a report. It was clear that in the European Commission they had understood that there was a value. They had seen some market research, etc. But for policymakers to move, they need to have something that they have commissioned, a study that really provides them with a justification to act. And so, apologies for this one, they wanted to have a defendable number. This was very clearly saying, give us a number that would allow us to go out and propose policy measures in this area, and it should be a figure that cannot be, how can I say, it cannot easily be shot down. And we came up with a number that that the Commission was happy with, and Gab was telling me, well, and we knew this was a modest number, but it was still, it created quite a splash at the time. It came with a whole appendix of like an econometric model, which was defendable, and the Commission was happy with it. And a lot of the things that we are seeing now in terms of funding, which was mentioned for open source, policy measures that have a stated preference for open source solutions, etc. A lot of that, you'll hear the Commission refer back to this study, because this provides for them the evidence that that there's an opportunity, not just that there is a value, but that there's an untapped potential. And then this has already been shown by Gab, I think. Actually the figure is not 65 billion euros or whatever, it's 8.8 trillion, but it's just shows that the impact is there in the marketplace. What should the public sector do, to match this sort of thing? And another quote from the Commissioner. What we have seen, I think, since then, and when there was a kind of realization that there is this really, there's an important, that we can grow the European economy if we promote, more open source contributions. Is really this shift to also talk about digital sovereignty and the role that open source plays for strengthening digital sovereignty. So we moved from sort of like cost cutting to sort of promoting innovation, startups, SMEs, to really this thing about. So it's in a way like I'm a political science major. You moved from really something which is quite low politics to something that is at the highest level. You're tying open source to the notion of having a resilient society, in the face of sort of a worsening geopolitical situation. And we're noticing this, that open source discussions are happening at a higher political level than before. And so what's the Commission doing? I'm just going to mention a few things. One of the things that has been talked a lot about is this, in order to promote digital sovereignty in the European Union, there have been a number of initiatives, quite high-level initiatives, that to some extent had to took years to be approved because to some extent they circumvent state aid rules, which are sacrosanct in the European Union. It's a fundamental principle of the European Union is that you don't allow for member states to to invest directly into homegrown sort of champions. And so this is a major initiative that the DG Comp allowed for this kind of direct investment into building cloud edge technologies, because we are facing this threat to our digital sovereignty. And so a lot of investment that is now been approved, and this is happening right now. It's and I know for a fact that this would not have happened if it was not specified that this investment would not be into proprietary technology, but into open source technology. So this 1.2 billion, which is matched by 1.5 billion, I think, from industry, has to be, the technology that is produced has to be in open source. And which brings me to the slides that I think, yes, I'm almost done. Because in fact, this was maybe the thing that nobody else wanted to touch, because it's not as flashy and exciting as some of the other things happening maybe in the marketplace, and it's not going to get the big attention in media potentially. But Barry, you mentioned, why aren't we building interoperable open source public services together in Europe? We are, each government member state has to implement public, e-government services for their citizens. And why aren't we collaborating on this? It makes sense, because this is happening, and you're talking about, Gab talked about the financial industry, but in the marketplace, there's still a need for companies to find where they add value, what they can monetize, where you have to find that sort of, you collaborate at a certain level, and then you have to decide, well, where can I differentiate? But for member states, you're not competing for citizens in that way, right? So there is actually no, there's no good reason not to do that. And so now actually, we have entered into force last year the Interoperable Europe Act, which basically says that for cross-border public services, member states are obliged to share any solution that they develop with another member state if they're asked to do so. And when they are, whenever you choose to develop such a service, there should be a priority for open source. So this is already now, this is a legally binding piece of, text. It's there, and I know that the European Commission is going to try to also implement support functions to actually make this happen. And so, stay tuned. And this is something that's also a bit exciting. It's this link to, I don't know if anybody has heard about this Eurostack thing. Also, in the name of digital sovereignty, there is this idea that we should build a sovereign European stack. But the interesting thing for me, that's a different discussion we can have, whether we should build strategic competence and skills in key technology areas, or if we should fund building purely or strictly European only technologies. I think I'm more on the side that we should be identifying technologies that are of strategic importance to Europe, where we don't have the capabilities, and we should act strategically to strengthen our presence in some of those projects, rather than fund the building of separate European technologies. But there it is. It's coming up in the next in the 2025 Horizon Europe program, and it's 10 million euros to build open source technologies. That's it.